Hello, I'm Hal Lublin.
And I'm Mark Gagliardi.
Since the dawn of humanity, one issue has gone unsettled. With the fate of the world in the balance, we're here to settle once and for all.
Best SNL Weekend Update anchor.
That's right. Don't worry, everyone. We got this.
Podcasts should have a theme song. Podcasts should not have a theme song. Yes, they should. No, they shouldn't. They sound good. Yeah, but people are just going to skip past it. You know what? You're right. We got this.
I'm Mark Gagliardi.
And I'm Hal Lublin.
And you're not.
No, neither of us.
Perfect.
Each of one
Neither
is
of us
not
are.
the other. Anyway, This is very exciting. I love SNL. I pitch you SNL topics all the time. And we have a killer guest here with us. He is the producer of the George Lucas talk show, among many other things, among a live reading that I'm taking part in that you can live stream. We'll talk about that later. But Patrick Cotnoir, welcome.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Oh, great. It's so good to have you here. It is a delight to talk comedy with you because you are one of those guys who is behind a lot of the cool comedy stuff that is happening right now.
Some would say too much.
To pick your brain. Yeah. We wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say that because we don't have your workload.
Sure.
We're just reaping the benefits of it and enjoying your shows. But it's delightful to talk comedy with you.
Yes, I'm very excited.
Now, Patrick, you, in addition to being basically an SNL encyclopedia that is on a far level above me, and I think I know a lot about the show, you have a history with SNL. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's see. If we're really going back, my history, I went to college in New York. I went to Pace University and realized almost immediately, like, one of the reasons I went to school in New York was because I wanted to work at SNL. That was like one of the main reasons for choosing that versus going to Boston or going to wherever. And we realized almost the first weekend when I was there that we were like, oh, we can just sit outside and wait for tickets, right? So we did that a lot. A lot of my college friends.
Amazing.
I think I went to 20 shows in college.
Whoa.
And those are like the first 2 years of college. It's too many. I shouldn't have done that many, but it was like the fun weekend thing to do, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we went to a ton. And then junior year, I applied for an internship and I got it. And I interned there for a year and a half.
Cool. So who was the weekend update anchor when you were there?
So I was there for the very end of Seth Meyers.
Gotcha.
Going into Cecily and Colin.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I was there, when did I start? Like December 2012 through May 2014. Yeah.
That had to be an absolute chaotic blast.
It was. And it was a crazy time. It was a crazy time to be there because, like, Seth was leaving, Bill was leaving, Fred Armisen was leaving, you know, like Sudeikis, I think, was leaving maybe. It was like a lot of the big boys, you know?
Yeah.
Were leaving. And that was a very strange thing just because, like, you know, I mean, Lauren always says that your favorite, you know, when you say the show was the best was when you were in middle and high school. And that was 100% true for me. So all these people that I like really got into the show with were like peacing out and I was there for it. You know, like I'm like, there's the Last Stefan video that they do with Seth Meyers. They like get married and like run off stage and whatever.
Right.
I'm right behind the door from where they run back out onto the stage.
Oh,
and it's very bizarre when you're like watching it up on a TV and you're seeing them do the video and then they like run off of the set and run through doors right to where you're standing. It's like a very jarring experience because that's not how TV works. You know?
No, you're basically doing a Last Action Hero moment with television.
Yes.
It's bursting out of the screen and into your life.
Yes, it was a really cool time to be there. I was there for Timberlake's Five Timers Club episode, which had like Chevy and Martin Short and Steve Martin and Tom Hanks and Alec Baldwin and Candace Bergen and, you know, like insane people. And it was just bizarre to be there all week and be like, there's Candace Bergen. Don't say anything to Candace Bergen. I know you really want to talk to Candace Bergen, but don't talk to Candace Bergen, you know? So, yeah, I mean, look, wouldn't trade it for the world. But it also like got it out of my system where I was like, did it? I don't need to do it anymore. Great.
Yeah.
Let's go do other stuff, you know? That being said, if they called me tomorrow, I would leave Los Angeles. You know?
You're available at some point.
Yeah,
he has to retire at some point, Patrick.
Yes, I'm Pekka Vale. And I hope they know that.
You're pinned for Lauren's job.
Yes.
But you 100% could do, pal.
I think it would be fun. I'm sure it's like very difficult, but also like the thing about that show, which this is not a hot take, is they make that show so much harder to make than it actually is. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're still doing that show on cocaine hours, and like, that's not what that needs to be. Like,
right.
You could start writing at 9 a.m. and be out of there by 5 p.m., but they're like, no, we're going to start writing at 10 p.m. and like stay all night. And that's just insane to me. And I'm so curious when he finally decides to go, which doesn't seem like it's this year anymore. You know, if they decide to change up the working hours, because I think it would make it such a more habitable place to live and work and thrive, and like, everyone would be happy, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I don't know.
Well, we're going to be discussing a group of 22 people. That is how many people have sat behind the anchor's desk at whether you want to call it Saturday Night News, or what was the other name they had for it? They called it,
Newsline.
Newsbreak.
Newsbreak.
Yeah. I don't know how many of those people are going to make it through, but there are a few. I think there are a few here who are standouts. Do you have someone, before we go into this, and you don't have to say who it is, do you have someone who you think is the best, Patrick?
Yeah, it's Christine Ebersol.
All right, well, we're done here.
Great. Asked and answered.
Yeah, that's it.
I do. I'm going to try not to put my thumb on the scale too much beforehand, but there is someone where I'm like, this feels like a fairly obvious choice, but we'll see.
Yeah, I have someone too, but who's a sentimental choice, but then I think I move more into what the actual answer might be, because I'm also colored not so much by middle school as when I was like 9 years old.
Sure.
Mark, do you have what you think the answer is? And then I can launch us into it, because I don't think my person is going to win, but I'm interested just to get the take on them.
No, I was more interested in coming up with criteria for us to look at to try to get to this objectively, because we're all going to have our subjective choices. I have a couple. For me, it's different reasons why there are different people that I would put at or close to the top.
Yeah.
But that, I think, is what it is for me, is I really want to try to look at this objectively.
Of course. I think the criteria are going to surface as we sort of discuss these people, because we're going to realize why they might not be it. The first season I remember watching real time was probably the last Ebersol year, but I wouldn't pick Christopher Guest. I don't think it was quite, his stuff was more the synchronized swimmers. Like, that's his sweet spot, or that. I hate it when that happens. Like, that stuff was more his forte. But the real season it picked up for me was the Dana Carvey cast. So Dennis Miller is my personal favorite, because I feel like all the best anchors make it, it's molded to their personality, and anybody who you would put at the top, I think it fits them, whether they're more recent or going back to Chevy Chase. There's something about Dennis Miller where it felt like that was the coolest part of the show for every year that he was there. And I think that's really impressive. What do both of you think about Dennis Miller as the anchor?
I don't think that's a bad choice. In my top 5, maybe. I remember it all got put on Netflix, maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. Or, a good solid chunk of it, minus a lot of music stuff. And I remember being really into Miller. I watched it all. That was like a weird summer where I was just like, we're doing all 700 episodes or whatever. Yeah, no, I remember like being into Dennis Miller, and I remember really liking him. I think, we can obviously talk about Criterion a little bit, but he's obviously a good joke teller. He's like obviously a good stand-up, but he's also good with the characters. And I think those are like kind of the two big things. You can be a great joke delivery machine, but not good with bits, and I think there are some people who certain people might say, well, clearly this is the best guy, but they may not be as skilled handling different characters. I'm not here to name names, but I am thinking of Norm Macdonald specifically. I don't think he's bad when he's got a character going on, but it's not the same amount of commitment and like interacting with the guys as like Dennis is just better at that, I think, in the same way that I think Jimmy and Tina are better at it, and Seth is very good at it. And there's certain people who obviously have their strengths and their weaknesses, but I think Dennis is like pretty well-rounded overall. It is hard to disassociate any outside of the show feelings for people, which does make it a little difficult to be like, well, he's the best, but also you're good at interacting with characters. And I think Dennis was good at that. And I think he was better than Norm. I don't think Norm is as strong when he's dealing with guys doing characters, but he's obviously a good joke teller, But I will get murdered online if the boys find out about that who love Norm,
Sure.
But it's also hard to distance Dennis from anything outside of the show Dennis.
It's tough. Yeah, the aftermath of Dennis Miller is tough.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something that I think is a big part of it is he lands the jokes as a criteria. I think another criteria that we're going to find in our best Weekend Update anchor or anchors is, and they all have it in their own way, it's that smirk, that wink, that sort of Bugs Bunny, ain't I a stinker? And I think that Dennis Miller had that in droves, like a 1980s level of that. You know what I mean? That leads to snark and kind of mean, and that sort of late 80s Gordon Gekko crowd would laugh at a lot of the caustic stuff that he said with that Bugs Bunny, ain't I a stinker? So I think just A, landing the jokes, and B, landing them with that wink where the audience doesn't immediately hate him for being mean. You know what I mean?
Totally. It is very funny looking at this list because I remember when I was going through watching it all, I was like, man, Dennis Miller is on forever. Like it felt like he was on that show for so long. And now you look at it and it's like 5 years, 5 seasons, maybe.
Yeah. Those were many of my formative seasons.
Totally.
So him and Kevin Nealon were my formative SNL years.
Who is your guy, would you say? If you know.
I think for me, my guy is Seth Meyers. In one of those combinations, because I think he's great with the side characters, his stuff with Stefan, his stuff with the boy reading the like bar mitzvah boy,
Jacob.
Yeah. All of the different, I think he's great at all of that. And he plays in a duo really well. So I think that versatility is another big part of it and the ability to play with others. I think for me, Seth comes to the top for that, but it could be one of the other combinations. I think Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are both also great at the co-anchoring thing. It's just that I think for me, the version of Seth Meyers's wink that he has feels genuine and it feels like you want to be on his side for things.
Seth was my answer too. So I'm glad that you said that.
That he was
he's
coming in number one.
Yeah. I mean, he's a perfect sort of headline guy. He's doing a great job hosting late night. But he also, I think what makes him so good in those character interactions and maybe the best at it is that like Boom Chicago, I'm an improv ensemble type guy who knows like his job there is to make that character look good and deliver lines. Like I think Jost tries, but Jost is a writer and not a performer. So like, I do think he's trying his best to serve those mini scenes, but he just doesn't have it the way an Amy Poehler or a Seth Meyers or a Tina Fey or even to an extent a Jimmy Fallon has. I think I agree that the best person is probably did it in the last 20 years just because it's evolved so much from Chevy Chase where it was just the Chevy Chase show. And then Jane Curtin, I do want to mention Jane Curtin because I think that's a great call. Great joke deliverer and brought a gravity to it that nobody else really did because she's just that talented of an actor. She's like an actor, not a sketch performer, not a comedian. And she's the grown up in the room. Right. That's the vibe that she gives is grown up in the room and really let the other characters. Emily Latella is funny because of Jane Curtin's. I mean, Emily Latella is funny, but Jane Curtin's straight man is the perfect foil. Yeah. That annoyance that she had with the side characters was really fun, or with the desk piece characters was really fun.
I'm looking at the breakdown of years. Is Jane by herself in season 2?
Yes, I believe
it's so interesting.
She took over for Chevy Chase.
When Chevy left,
And then Dan Aykroyd did it some, and Bill Murray did it some. Yeah. But also Dan Aykroyd, they had that weird conceit that Dan Aykroyd was the station manager.
Yeah.
Do you remember that or have seen these? It's such a weird combination that he introduces himself as station manager Dan Aykroyd.
I mean, that feels like the most Aykroyd thing you can do.
Sure.
He's like, I'm gonna make this extra weird. I'm gonna put an extra spin on it. You know,
there's gonna be a character here. But you know what doesn't age well? Your catchphrase being calling your co-anchor an ignorant slut.
Yeah,
that does not age well.
Yeah. I did love the Bill Murray version of it when he came in and did point counterpoint and just conceded everything to her immediately. It's a really good payoff to that original acrimony. And Bill Murray is great, but it's just not my problem with him doing that is sort of similar to Cecily doing it, which is I would rather see her come in and do characters because she's so good at it.
Yeah.
And by her being the anchor, it robs me of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Which I think they realized.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like the immediate pivot out of there, which is a bummer, because it's such a public job to lose,
Yeah.
It feels like a demotion, even if it's for the right reason, where it's like, you're better at doing characters. Not that she was bad at anchoring, because she wasn't, but it's so much better to have her doing as a character. I think she's, top 2 or 3, Weekend Update character people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The girl you don't want to get cornered by at a party is one of my all-time favorite desk pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
Yeah. Let's go. I want to go back to the very beginning. Since we jumped back a little bit, we're going back and forth in time, inexplicably skipping the entirety of the 80s and 90s, fellas. We're going to have to get to this at some point. But let's talk about the OG Chevy Chase. I mean, again, he's another one like Dennis Miller, where later iterations and stories that you hear might sully that original experience. But I was a fan when I was a kid. The Chevy Chase Weekend Update vibe was so fun for me. I go back to that wink, that smirk, and I think that's going to be a big part of it. And I think they've got to whoever is at the desk has to capture that. It's almost like the comedy energy of the time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You've got to be weirdly zeitgeist, either setting it or following it. I think Jost and Che kind of follow it. I think some of them have said it before. What are you guys' thoughts on Chevy Chase? Yeah,
Chevy's the king of the wink and the smirk. And you wonder how much different this whole segment would be if it had been literally anyone else. If it had started with Jane, would the whole vibe of Weekend Update be different now because they were all trying to copy Jane Curtin? Yeah. I don't know.
Jane Curtin to me feels almost like that Kentucky Fried Movie version of a news anchor where they're just dry and it's just the funny is not their job. Either sight gags or some other character is going to do that part.
Yeah.
But Chevy had the vibe.
It also serves, if you have somebody like Jane Curtin delivering your punchlines, they're going to hit better because they're going to be more of a surprise. You're expecting Chevy Chase to give you some sort of punchline. You're waiting for the weird twist, the prostitute stamp where it's, was it 15 cents? If you want to look at it, it's a quarter. Great. That's an Alan Zoibel joke, I think. And brilliantly told. He delivered stuff really well. I also don't think you get Chevy Chase the star without Weekend Update. He had what nobody on that show had, which is an entire segment that was just him. That positioned him to be the star of the show and turned that into not only what everybody was trying to aspire to, but the star maker position. It was a big deal. It made that position what it became. It might not have been that with anybody else doing it.
And the specific name recognition. He's saying his name over and over every single week, which eventually on that show, as they go on and everyone becomes a star, it happens more where they're doing a sketch backstage and it's Jane and Gilda or whatever it is. But right from the get-go, it's Chevy, 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 Yeah. And I think that is important too. But it is, that doesn't work for everyone. Brian Doyle Murray doesn't become a household name. You may know who he is, but I don't know that, all of America had Brian Doyle Murray fever in
we did,
1981
right?
to 1982. Yeah, no,
sure,
of course.
Yeah. I'm sick with it still.
Yeah.
I can't walk properly because of Brian Doyle Murray fever. It affected my spine.
Let me ask you guys this. You mentioned, this is just a sidebar. This might be one of those criteria that could put someone over the top at the end. But for now, we'll use it as a sidebar. You mentioned Chevy Chase saying his own name as part of it. You've got, of course, we started the show. It was, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. You've got Norm Macdonald with, and now the fake news. Who do you think had the best sign on and or sign off? I know Miller with his, that's the news and I am out of here. Felt
and
so
also the intro of I'm Dennis Miller. What can I tell you? And
what can I tell you? Yeah.
It's a very, I like that because it's very him. I can't think of anybody else who had a memorable intro to themselves.
I mean, I guess Norm.
And those.
And now the fake news.
Sort of,
yeah.
Right? It's just those three who really had a memorable intro.
Yeah, I guess.
Didn't Colin have one?
I feel like maybe you're right.
Oh, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Yes, that's his outro.
That's right.
I'm looking on Wikipedia for this.
The most reliable.
Yeah. Those are probably the big ones, right?
Yeah.
I'm Kevin Neal and that's the news to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Faye and Polar, I don't think so. Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow. Who was that?
That was Chevy Chase, but then didn't somebody else bring it back?
It was Garrett Morris doing the Heart of the Hearing when they.
Oh yeah.
Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead.
I think Jimmy and Tina also did Good Night and Have a Pleasant Tomorrow.
That's great. I like them doing a callback.
Yes, they did. Yeah. They did.
That's cool. And also might be the only callback hearkening to a previous. I don't know. I'm saying this out my butt. I have no idea if this is true, but the only like sign off or sign on that harken back to a classic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of rote now. How you do it. You get into it pretty quickly and you get out of it pretty quickly. You just say goodnight. Yeah,
Dennis Miller doing his whole, all right, everybody ready for it? I'm going to do a flourish. That's the news. You're like, okay, just cut the camera. We got
he does that. He always did
and
the scribble on the piece of paper and boom.
Yeah, a full spin and throw. Yeah,
that was really good. I'll tell you what don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we can talk through some of the eras, Mark, if that's what you'd like to do, and then we'll get down to our finalists. I think we already know sort of where they exist, but we'll pay homage to some of your favorites out there who are listening. So thank you, Kevin Nealon, fan of the show. Love your hiking podcast. We'll be right back to talk about you.
You never know what you'll learn more about on the Celebrity Trivia Show Go Fact Yourself.
For over 150 episodes, we've welcomed guests like DJ Jazzy Jeff, Audie Cornish, and Andy Richter to tell us why they love what they love, and then get quizzed on it.
And past quizzes have included some pretty unexpected topics like
reverse painting,
the perfect flip turn while swimming,
Prince's house party playlist from that one episode of New Girl,
and so much more.
Plus, our guests meet surprise experts in their topics.
Like the time we met an actual celebrity cow.
So, listen to Go Fact Yourself twice a month, every month on Maximum Fun.
Do it for the cow!
Hey, do you have a favorite episode of Star Trek?
If you do, you should also have a favorite Star Trek podcast.
Greatest Trek is about all the new streaming Star Trek shows, and it's a great companion to The Greatest Generation, our hit show about back catalog Star Trek that you grew up with.
It's a comedy podcast by two folks who used to be video producers, so it's a serious mix of comedy and insight that fits right into the Maximum Fun network of shows.
And Greatest Trek is one of the most popular Star Trek podcasts in the world.
So if you're following Lower Decks, Prodigy, or Strange New Worlds, come hang out with us every Friday as we roast and review our favorite Star Trek shows.
It's on MaximumFun.org, YouTube, or your podcatching app.
All right. Should we talk about the big chunk of time in the 80s from the time that the original cast left up until we got Dennis Miller? We had a whole sea of them, and nobody lasted very long. I mean, I forgot that Mary Gross was up there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A great performer.
Sure. This whole list is full of great performers, but it is like, it's great. Like, I remember Brad Hall doing it so much longer, on the rewatch. Like, there's so many of these people where you're like, oh, they did it for like 6 episodes and that's it? Okay.
Yeah.
Don Rickles doing it twice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's bonkers that Don Rickles
crazy
did the news.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my era, again, like, is there anyone that we think could come out of that into the finals? Do we give Don Rickles a pass to the finals just out of it, like giving him the Oscar he never received for all the other stuff?
For Casino?
Yeah, exactly. Give it to him for Casino.
Yeah, I think he earned it for other work outside of this. And it was really like
fair.
Ebersol and more Ebersol and Damanian, who wasn't there for that long, trying to like figure out, well, how can I change it? We'll change it. We'll eliminate the news. All right, we'll call it this. So like, how can I make the show different? And then when Lorne returns, you get the return of Weekend Update.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're interesting people. I want to say something about Charles Rocket, not about him specifically, but about that entire cast, which is neck and neck with the Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Michael Hall cast for worst season. Like most people would argue between those two. But I think that 1980 cast, 80-81 cast had the hardest job in front of them when in the very first sketch, they all introduced themselves. Oh, I'm kind of a mix between Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, or like whoever they were supposed to be a mix of. And it was like, we're not doing anything to establish these performers as who they are and what they're like. Gilbert Gottfried trying to boil him down to a guy who's like brilliant on a bunch of levels that I don't think everybody even got to appreciate for as long and as pervasive as he was in show business. Like, it just did none of them any service, and they had a ton of talent in that cast. So, Charlie Rocket, not necessarily the best Weekend Update anchor, not the best guy for that job, had a tragic end as a person, but a great career outside of the show, like super talented comedic actor. It just wasn't, he was like they wanted him to be Chevy Chase so badly, Like that was the first real attempt to just be someone else. And you can see why that doesn't work and why the show's strength is in creating new stars with their own voice rather than trying to pigeonhole people.
Yeah.
I think Brad Hall is like by default probably the best one of that group, right?
Yeah.
And that's not, smack talking Brad Hall at all. I think he's like perfectly fine on that show.
He's the central casting anchor.
Yes.
Like
totally.
if you looked at all of these and went cast one of them as an anchor, you'd be like, oh, Brad Hall.
Yeah.
Brian Doyle Murray is the, if this was network, he's the Albert Brooks.
Yes.
And you buy him as a station manager a lot more than you do Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, that's true. Well, because he was born 61.
They've never gone back to the station manager conceit. Would you like that? Because you do like when people revisit older catchphrases and stuff. Would you like it if Andrew Dismukes takes over next year and goes, I'm the station manager?
That would be amazing. But I don't want him to be, I don't want him to stop at station manager. I want him to be like, hi, I'm the president of NBC anchoring weekend. Just something completely outlandish. Get bigger and bigger.
Is it weird that you just made me think, just because you brought up Dismukes, who I love, like just such a, he's like one of those like killers in the cast. That feels like if Jost and Che, if this is their last year, that it might be Longfellow's to lose. Like he feels like such a prototypical, he feels like a Weekend Update anchor.
Yeah. Do you think he does it alone or do you think he does it with someone?
He feels like a solo to me, but I think he could do it with someone.
Yeah.
I think it's gotta be duos now. I think duos have proven to be so strong and so fun, and you can play you get so many games out of duos. You get Really with Seth and Amy. You get the joke trading with Jost and Che. Now you can do it with desk piece characters coming in with an anchor doing that, but for me personally, I love the duos.
Yeah. What do you think?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think, I also think it's a lot of time to give one person. You know, and unless you're Seth Meyers, who by the time he was doing it as this one guy had been there almost 10 years, like 8-9 years, something like that. That's a lot of time to give, Longfellow or whoever has been there for a year and a half or 2 years or something like that. It is crazy to me that Colin Jost right now on IMDb is the 8th highest cast member for amount of episodes he's been in. Amazing. And three of the people on that list are the Saturday Night Live band, which is not a single person.
Yeah.
Don Pardo and Lenny Pickett, the band leader.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy that he's that high up. And even Daryl Hammond is up that high because he's been doing the intros for so long.
Right.
Like, it's wild that Jost and Che are both easily over 200 episodes at this point.
That's wild.
It's unreal.
Jost is interesting to me because he feels like they both had the same job at Harvard, didn't they? They were both editor of the Harvard Lampoon.
I think so, yeah. Was Seth? I don't know if Seth was editor.
Or he was just at the Harvard Lampoon.
So I think he was a Hasty Pudding guy.
Oh, maybe it was Hasty, but whatever it was, they had similar trajectories in their coming up. So for some reason, those two guys seem very parallel to me.
Yeah.
But I feel like I just like Seth Meyers' smirk better than Colin Jost's smirk. Seth Meyers his smirk lets me feel like I am in on something. Colin Jost's smirk lets me feel like I'm enjoying watching something.
Yeah. Seth went to Northwestern, just for the record.
Northwestern.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Harvard of the Midwest.
The Harvard of the Midwest. I'm completely off then. Maybe it's just a vibe thing that they both give Ivy League smarm vibe.
Which thrives on that show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in the writer's room. Like, Colin had been in that writer's room for so long before he went on the air. Like, I'm listening to are you guys listening to Lonely Island, Seth Meyers podcast?
I swear I was going to bring that up.
Yes.
I love it.
Phenomenal. I love it so much. It's really great. And every time they bring up, Colin wrote this sketch in 2003 or something like that, it really melts your brain because you don't think of him as being there that long. But it's crazy how long he's been there.
There also is a bit on this podcast, Mark, of either writers or casting, or whoever's involved in the digital short or in the sketches they're talking about sends them voice notes. So there's a lot of Will Forte, there's some Fred Armisen, there's a bunch of people, but Colin Jost, the first voice memo he sent in didn't sound like him. It sounded like a different voice, which they all commented on. And there was a weird sound like he was peeing in the background. So the next time he did it was a completely different voice and the sound of water being poured.
Perfect.
And as much as I enjoy Colin Jost, like I think he's a decent joke teller, he is funnier in those voice memos. Those voice memos are funnier than anything I've seen him do on Weekend Update, which is more a compliment to the voice memos than a burn on him.
Yeah, but that's also kind of how that show works. Like there's so many people that I'm sure you both and I know personally who have been on that show, and you're like, you're so much funnier in real life or like on the stage at UCB or wherever than you ever were on that show. And it's such a bummer that you never got to see that, because like when people think of that person now, they're like, oh yeah, they were on for a season or two and they weren't that good. Oh, okay, I'm never going to think about that person again. And it's like, oh no, but you missed so much. You know, it's the Tim Robinson thing. Like Tim Robinson, thank God he has that show, because like if he didn't, maybe the funniest guy I've ever seen on stage live, you know?
Right.
And if he had just been a one and done on that show, it would have been a real bummer and like a loss for the entertainment industry in general. And like memes would have taken such a huge hit, you know? We wouldn't have any memes.
Oh my gosh, the industry would have tanked.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, though, about people not always reaching their potential on that show. I think sometimes performers go on that show, and one of the reasons is that they just don't have the resources that they need to do their thing. They don't have time on screen. They don't have the faith of the writing staff yet, or for whatever reason, they're not making their comic voice heard. I think another one that happens is one in particular will be stifled by the network. And the case I'm talking about, of course, is Norm Macdonald trying to do his thing with the O.J. Simpson trial and getting told no and continuing to do it anyway. Do you think that's why, like, he's sort of the comedian's update anchor, because he was willing to give the job up
He's
for
the bad
a running
boy.
gag? Yeah, he's the bad boy.
Yeah.
He's the bad boy, and people like that, you know? I think people also really love Norm in general. So I don't, if that had not happened, I'm sure it would still be, you know, the internet boys online's favorite Weekend Update anchor, you know?
Yeah.
But it is nice that, probably not nice for him, but it's nice that he had like this weird arc on that show, and like leaving that show dramatically doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
He's like kind of like the one that like got in trouble and then immediately left, right? I can't think of anyone else who like immediately left. Even Charles Rocket stuck around, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the legend helps it so much.
Yeah, that's true.
He also had, like, in those last couple years, had come into his own as a sketch performer. That's when you got Burt Reynolds and his brilliant David Letterman. I've never seen anybody do, like, nobody had really been able to do an impression of to that level. But also, he is like the comedian's comedian, and he's very, like, kind of almost like Dada in his approach to. It's like he's going to tell a bad joke, but he's going to tell it so well, you're going to laugh at it because he knows it's bad. He doesn't believe it's good. Yeah. Like he's very well engineered. And also it makes sense that he just wouldn't care. He's just going to do whatever he wanted to do. If you've ever seen or heard the story of him on Star Search, where he's like making soup. Like I said, I'm going to make soup. So I went to, the grocery and I bought some beans and I bought some tomato. He goes through a whole list of things, and he's like, then I got home and realized I don't know how to cook Norm Macdonald. And like, that's what he presented. Like, he just doesn't care. He's just going to go do, and I think his agent had made him do it. He didn't want to do it. So he didn't play. That could have been a break for him. Yeah. But instead he just he knew himself really, really well. So
do you think improv people or stand-ups make the better update? Because I guess Seth is both technically, if he's doing stand-up now.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Really well. He wasn't before. I think, you can have strong examples for either side.
Yeah. And his stand-up feels like a one-man show.
Yeah. If you're in a duo, I think a pair of improvisers is going to be better than a pair of stand-ups. But probably if you have one update anchor, a unified practiced comic voice would be beneficial.
So you hate Jostin Che, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I hate Jostin. No, I like Jostin Che. I like Jostin Che. Their trading jokes is one of the funniest bits that show has ever done. Yeah. I mean, I love a good stunt in Weekend Update. I loved Stefan not knowing what jokes were going to be on the cue cards. I love that. Anytime there is the proof that it's live, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
which is so fun.
Yeah, that was Stefan with Mulaney changing what was on the.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Having to discover that stuff was really fun. There also is an art to, if you're going to do Weekend Update, not only are you going to tell your own jokes, but you have to be able to tell other people's. So there's a rhythm and timing that I think most improvisers who make it as far as being part of this SNL cast have pretty good timing. I think stand-ups maybe struggle a little bit more with other people's material because they're used to writing everything themselves. I think I see that a little bit. That's maybe why Jost and Che, while I enjoy them, aren't always my flavor of ice cream, because it feels like for Che in particular, that if he didn't write it, it's not going to be like the jokes with him are almost always his reaction to the audience's reaction when something dies. Like he's having the time of his life out there. And there's something to that idea of like, we're aware that we're doing this bit. We're not really committing to it as a comedy bit. It's just sort of, they're making themselves the personalities in a way that I don't enjoy personally as much, although it's obviously been very successful for them. Is what I would say.
It is crazy, though. I'm looking at this list and I'm like double checking all this. I don't think the first stand up is Dennis Miller.
Yeah, it's all improvisers up to then.
It's all improv or actors or whatever until then.
Yeah,
unless you're counting Eddie Murphy, which I don't really.
He didn't do it enough. I don't think to really count. It's really only like 4 or 5 because you have McDonald, Quinn, Dennis, and Che. Kevin Nealon became a stand-up, right? He wasn't doing stand-up.
Was he not a stand-up before?
Was he? He maybe he was.
I think he was a stand-up.
So there you go. Kevin Nealon also, but he was so well established on the show at that point. Like, he knew by the time he took over, he had been there for what? 4 or 5 years, 5 years. Yeah. He was there in the 86, 87 cast.
I want to throw something out there while we're talking about improvisers and stand-ups. I think there's one thing that improvisers know inherently and craft and work on. I remember when we were at Second City, there was a thing that one of our teachers taught us. He said, the first thing you have to do is let the audience know 2 things. You have to let them know that you're energetic and that you're smart. So, in this case, it was about sketches. It was like, let your first 2 sketches, one be really smart, one be really energetic. Doesn't matter which order you do it in. And there's a combo when I look at this list that makes me go, this feels like that perfect, and they're both, it's no coincidence that they're both brilliant improvisers from 2 different schools of improv. And if you want the smart plus energy combo, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, it's like that's each of their superpower. And the 2 of them together, I think, are the best version of improvisers doing Weekend Update, using their strengths in that way. We haven't talked much about them yet. What are you guys' thoughts on Fey and Poehler? Or Fey in general? Fey was there for a long time, and we haven't really talked about her a ton.
Maybe like the happiest duo, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think is important. Like, it is like, you're here with your friends, you're here with, we're just hanging out and chatting and whatever, which is great. And I'm not, that might come off sounding like I'm saying it because it's 2 women, and that's not why I'm saying it. Like, I genuinely feel that way. I think, that was probably around when I first started watching, because when would that have been? That would have been through 2006. Yeah, I started in like 2003, 2004-ish, something like that. So it would have been the tail end of Fallon and then Tina and Amy. So that was... that was very informative for me on just what that show was in general. It is crazy that Tina and Amy were only there 2 seasons together.
That's right. That's it.
Isn't that wild? Like, it feels like so much more. It's just because they both, Tina started so much earlier and Amy ended so much later. Although she didn't even end that much later. Like, she was only there 2008. Like, the fact that she and Seth only did it for 2 years too is kind of crazy.
Yeah. But now they're like a comedy duo.
Yeah.
Fey and Poehler, I think of them together now, and that's based on the alchemy that happened when they were at that desk together.
Yeah. It's based on 2 years of SNL and like 2 movies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's also kind of it.
And then awards shows later and all that.
But all that time in Chicago, like, they knew each other so well coming in. And that lineage. So what Colin Quinn, who I think is hilarious, but I was never a fan of his style of Weekend Update. It's like a little too dry for me. So when that lineage of like Fallon and Fey, which it could have just been Tina on her own. It couldn't have been Jimmy on his own, which speaks to how great she is at delivering material. But that lineage from Jimmy and Tina to Tina and Amy to Amy and Seth to Seth is probably the strongest overall run.
100%.
Update. Like, that made it became a must-watch segment when all of those people were involved in it.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So,
and again, maybe it's the recency bias, but no, if you say that your middle school version, that wasn't my middle school and high school version, but still, I think that that's the best era to me of, really just hitting its stride, knowing what it was doing. The desk, like I mean, you were there. I'm sure witnessed like how the machine worked. By then it was a well-oiled desk pieces happen here. And so you're slotting into something that exists.
Yeah, and it's get the heck out of the way because they're rolling this desk in right now, and then they're flying in drunk uncle. That's really what it is. It's just like people are like picking people up and like throwing them on stage, basically.
So great.
It's amazing that it works as well as it does, because it is a machine. But those moments of when it doesn't feel like a machine, I think is when that show is at its best. Because you can go through 6 episodes and be like, did I watch those? But then when something crazy happens, that's when you're like, oh, this is fun. But I think a lot of people there have worked there so long that they're not looking for those crazy moments. They're looking to get in and get out and do the show and make sure, But, and I think Seth tried to inject that a little more. They had Stefan, but they also had like Nicholas Fane, the Fred Armisen character who would like read the news but not really say anything.
Oh, so good. It was an impression of David Cross, right?
Oh, yeah. And then Taryn had that Jebediah Atkinson, who was like the old, the critic.
Old-timey critic.
Yeah, and those were like a little looser than a lot of those characters, I think, that they normally have on that show. And I feel like that lent a lot of like why Seth is great is because he can go with the flow and like roll with the punches on all of those characters who like don't totally feel scripted, even though they probably are more scripted than you actually think they are. Like, they're just figuring out how to make it not seem scripted. And I think that adds a lot to the Amy Seth, era of that show.
Yeah.
I just said a lot of words. Sorry about that.
They're great words. The thing about Seth Meyers that gets me, and I forget who he said told him this, and I don't see anybody else do it since, is when that camera, like a lot of times the anchor will turn and wait for the camera. He waits for the camera and then turns. So and that is such a small thing that exudes such a level of like calm and control that you feel like a weird trust in him. Not that he's a real news anchor in any way, but that you feel like there's a sense of competence to him that whatever he's going to do is going to turn out. And it has by and large. And he, like I said before, his stand-up special is so fascinating to me because it feels like a one-man show, but also has all those elements of stand-up. So he does it exactly like you would expect a Second City, Boom Chicago improviser to build a stand-up act.
I was thinking about that today because, not to timestamp this episode, the trailer for his stand-up special came out today for his new one that he's got coming out. And I was like, how does he have time to craft an hour stand-up? Like, it's crazy. He's not going to the clubs. Like, he's not going to like work on this stuff. He's just going out on the weekends, I guess, and being like, we'll see if this works. And I don't even think it's every weekend. Like, it's always impressive to me when late night hosts do other stuff. Cause I'm just like, I don't know how you have the energy or the time or the stamina to like get other stuff done besides your job, Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely insane. But I think that's why I would ultimately land on him. Is that, because there are so many people that, especially in that later run, that kind of do everything. But there's something about like him being such a great joke deliverer and great with all the desk pieces and characters, but also like this weird, calm energy that he exudes. To me, it's between like him and Poehler and Faye. Like those are the three. Those are the three best to ever do it.
Yeah, I think that, and it's that whole crew that came in or that all worked, in various combinations with each other. You know what I mean? A great baseball team isn't one player. A great baseball team is mixing up combinations of people until you get the right combination of people. Do we want to, we did say best anchor though, right? Was that how we put this?
Yes.
So I didn't know if it was Weekend Update era or anchor. So we do need to look at one specific person, I guess, because we could say Faye and Poehler. We could say Myers and Poehler. We could say Strong and, you know what I mean? Like there's all different combos we could do.
I think it's anchor. I think we're doing single anchor, right?
Anchor,
Gotta be.
So we gotta pick one out of that who does their thing the best. I would put Faye up there. I don't know that I'd put Amy Poehler up there. I think she's absolutely brilliant. I think Tina Fey gave us a smarter arc, more of a, you know what I mean? Like, there's something to be said for the quality of the jokes too. And I think Tina Fey is just one of the smartest people ever to write on that show. So her material output is so great. So I would almost say that for me, it's Myers versus Fey. What do you guys think?
I think that's probably fair, right?
Yeah.
I think it's Myers versus Fey, or like Miller versus Myers, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Oh, wow, Dennis Miller creeped back in.
Well, I don't know. He was in my top. He was in my top 3 or 4, probably, is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, who else would it be besides that?
Yeah.
I don't think I would realistically choose him. I don't think he's my choice. I think my answer is Seth. Like, I think that's the answer for me. But I think those 3 are like the 3 that should be in conversation. That's my take.
Yeah. I think Norm is in the conversation as well. But that conversation, if that conversation is multiple circles, the Venn diagram only crossed with one person.
Yeah. But I don't think Norm has the skills to like interact with characters. Like,
yeah, I think you're right about that.
You know, he would like introduce Sandler to do a song or something like that. And that's, you know?
Yeah.
Is that
Seth
even him? Or was that
both
Kevin
gave?
Nealon? Yeah.
They gave to it. Yeah, it was Kevin Nealon that did more of the Sandler stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
Briefly, Norm.
Which means I can't even think of a character that Norm interacted with.
Yeah.
Right. I also go back to, I remember in like 95 or 96, Rolling Stone had an article about the show at the time. And it was like, they interviewed like Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry and Norm Macdonald. The way he comes across in that article is like he couldn't want to be there less and couldn't care less for any of the people who are in that cast with him.
Here's what I'll say. I don't think he was an easy guy to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Or an easy guy to, interact with in general, probably for a lot of people. That's the vibe I have picked up from,
You're kind of in Norm's orbit, right?
Yeah.
Like you just you show up and you're in the cage with him and it's
he's doing his thing. He's doing his own thing, which makes me not want to vote for him for update, because I think you need to be inviting and welcoming and play with other people well. And that's, I don't think that was necessarily one of his strong suits. He has a lot of strong suits, but I would not put that towards the top of his list.
Yeah. I also think that what I'll say for Tina Fey is I think she, more than anyone else, introduced this idea of like she had these like little personal asides that she would do that Seth Meyers picked up and Amy Poehler as well. And Jimmy Fallon, I think, followed her on it. That gave the position a like sort of a depth of character that it didn't really have before. Like she built a character out of it that wasn't just smarm. It was someone who's maybe a little insecure or like wasn't afraid to take a shot at herself in a way that most of the other anchors never did. So she created something that I think Seth Meyers built on in that way.
It feels like, I think one thing that Amy Poehler did really well in that regard, like in creating that character, and I think one of the reasons that character shines through so well is if you look at all of the anchors leading up to her, there is an ironic detachment to all of them. There is that sort of either dry comic going all the way back to Chevy Chase, that dry delivery of just jokes based on what's happening. Tina Fey was the first time I got a sense of she cared about the stories that she was telling us. You know what I mean? Like some of the anchors, they're like, I trust you to laugh at this joke. Some of the anchors are, I dare you to laugh at this joke. Tina Fey's thing seemed to me like we are all laughing at this joke because there are other emotions that we could be having and we are choosing laughter in this moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that gave her a richness of character.
I also will say for Amy is I do think that she, maybe more than almost any other anchor, if not every other anchor, had the I'm so excited to be here vibe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of the other ones don't give off that. They're all trying to, which may not be the thing that you're looking for in a news anchor,
right.
know?
But in a fake news anchor, like a comedy fake news anchor, great. At midnight.
Yeah. Yes, totally. And I think that was a key to why people liked her so much, was like, yeah, we're excited you're there too. We're watching the show. We want to have fun,
Yeah. My interactions with her are minimal, but Mark and I did a show with her in San Francisco years ago. And her happy to be there, like getting to see someone who I'd been watching since Upright Citizens Brigade was airing. Like, that was a huge deal for me, but she had that. That's just an accurate reflection of her.
Yeah,
so
she is just happy to be there.
They're like representing who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I might agree with Patrick. I think I might go Seth Meyers. For that. It feels weird to pick the straight white dude.
I know.
It just feels weird when there's been so much progression in that area. But I just blindly.
I mean, there's been progression. I wouldn't say there has been much progression.
Not so much. But it's better now than it was. Not as good as it will be in the future. That we know.
I just think the odds of us picking a straight white dude are like pretty high, just based on the anchors on this show.
The odds, but I think he's the best one who's ever done it. I think he melds together the best of everything that came before him, and at some point that will be picked up. I think that some of the best parts of Jost and Che, when they're not editorializing what's happening, come from watching Seth Meyers do it and like learning, being part of that coaching tree, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned before, when he's doing desk pieces with the characters, his rhythm is so tight that it's almost like he's providing the soundtrack. He's providing a straight man soundtrack of rim shots to what the other characters are doing. He just gets the assignment from all angles, and it feels the most comfortable doing it.
Yeah. I think people of the world, I encourage you, especially if you have Peacock, you can go back and watch all of these people do it. It's fun to see how it's evolved over the years and to see how much of the current events of that time you're able to remember and understand the jokes about. That's a lot of fun, especially when you get into the Reagan presidency. But the best to ever do it at this point is Seth Meyers. Really? Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I won't go into it. I didn't write anything for it because I didn't know he was going to be the winner, but I'm happy about it. Your best Weekend Update anchor is Seth Meyers, asked and answered.
Boom.
Boom. Boom, boom.
We did
Magic, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight. One of my favorite topics to discuss. So it's always nice to be able to, treat it like a sport. That's always the fun thing. Is treat it.
Oh,
yeah.
We're moneyballing all kinds of stuff on this show over here every week. Patrick, where do you want people to find you?
Oh, God.
Or you want people to find you?
I do. Yeah. I do.
Okay.
You can find me on Instagram at Cotnoir, Cotnoir. You can find me on Twitter at Patrick Cotnoir. Some of the things I work on, George Lucas Talk Show. Very silly, very dumb talk show. One of our best episodes, Seth Meyers.
Yeah,
so am I biased? Did this ruin this by me saying biased? Because here's what I'll say. Up until about a month ago, for almost 2 years, Seth Meyers had a Russian nesting doll of Connor Ratliff as George Lucas on his desk.
Fantastic.
If you go look mid-2022 to mid-2024, the closest thing to Seth Meyers on his desk is George Lucas. George Lucas Talk Show, very, very silly talk show. Connor Ratliff plays George Lucas. We interview real people as themselves. Yeah, Weird Al's been on. Whoopi Goldberg's been on. Seth Meyers has been on. Like a lot of insane people. It's all on YouTube. You can go find that. Something Hal and I work on together is been doing these live reads of the Star Wars movies.
So fun.
The first two are on YouTube currently. You can watch it at NabooMovie.com or CaminoCaper.com. If you're listening to this when it comes out on November 16th, we're doing the Revenge of the Sith live read. It's called Mustafar Takes Los Angeles. It's a play on the Muppets Take Manhattan. And it's sold out in person already, but the live stream is available. You can go to MustafarLA.com or just go to Dynasty Typewriter's website and you can watch that. And what else? I don't George Lucas Talk Show, we've got November 6th. So November 9th, if tickets are still available at this point, which I hope they're not. If you live in New Jersey, if you live near Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, we're doing a show at the Smod Castle with Kevin Smith as our guest. Awesome. We've got some shows coming up in Austin, in New York, and I don't know if it's announced yet, but we'll be at San Francisco Sketchfest in January. And I don't know. There's so many other things. Just follow me and we'll see what's going on.
The documentary? Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, the documentary. Yeah. There's a documentary.
Fantastic documentary about George Lucas.
Thank you so much. Yeah. There's a documentary about the talk show that these filmmakers, Ryan Jacoby and Marcia Chamberlain, made. It's called I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff story. It's on Amazon, iTunes, anywhere you want to buy it. You could go to I'mGeorgeLucas.com and it'll redirect you to wherever it is. But it was a 5-year project that went through COVID, went through all of this stuff. We kickstarted it, and it was a real labor of love for these filmmakers and for us. And hopefully by this time this comes out, we're really working on a Blu-ray. I really want a Blu-ray to happen, and I'm pushing super hard. Our goal is to do a 2-disc Blu-ray that is stuffed with so many things because we think it's very funny for this dumb little documentary to have an insanely packed Blu-ray, and we want to have the most commentaries that have ever been on a movie before. That is the goal for this. The current record is 11. We think we can blow that out of the water. We want to have like 30. So ideally, that will have been taken care of by then, or if not, very soon afterwards. It'll be out into the world, hopefully.
If I'm just going to throw this out there, if you want one of the tracks to be two guys who are not involved in the film in any way, 100%, and have no real level of fame,
100,000%.
We will absolutely do it.
Great.
We're
I love it.
that now.
I love it. That's exactly what I want.
Patrick Cotnoir, thank you for covering this topic with us. This topic is closed, but there are many more to discuss. So please reach out to us via email at wegotThisPodcast@gmail.com or
find us everywhere on social media at We Got This Podcast, except for Instagram. I was lying before. We're at We Got This Show on there. And go to our Facebook group. Talk about your favorite Weekend Update anchors and jokes if you want. We'll discuss the desk characters at another episode. Maybe Patrick Cotnoir will return to the show. He will come back and talk about SNL. We already have him. We're scheduled in for another episode. It's all happening. You can find out all the information at facebook.com/group/We Got This Podcast. Thank you to producer Ken Plume, researcher Kate McManus, who finally, we gave her enough lead time to put together research, and she did. Great job. Never disappoints.
Wonderfully.
Thank you to graphic designer Uri Kilman and QA engineer Jen Alba.
And thanks, of course, to our musicians, Jonathan Dinerstein and Mike Furman, for our score and theme song, respectively. And thanks to you, the people of the world, for giving us an opportunity to talk about a show that obviously we all love and care about and has become a big part of our lives. And we wanted to share it with you. We love sharing these things with you. We hope you go online and argue about it after the show. We couldn't do it without you. We wouldn't do it without you. So to you, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. For Hal Lublin, I'm Mark Gagliardi.
Mark Gagliardi, I'm Hal Lublin. And don't worry, everybody.
We got this.
We got this.
We got this.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows
supported
directly
by you.